all my paranormal misfits, and welcome to the Paranormal Misfit podcast. I am your host, Chrissy, and I'm here to talk about all things paranormal and spooky. From experience that I or someone else has had, to the shows, movies, and books, to lores and legends, and to the places known for the paranormal. I'm going to talk about all of it. I myself am a believer with a healthy set of skepticism. You'll hear my thoughts and feelings about different topics revolving around the paranormal, so cozy up with your favorite beverage of choice and listen along. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the newest episode of the Paranormal Misfit podcast. As you know, I am your host, Chrissy, and tonight I plan on talking about a movie that is considered a cult classic from the 80s. So go ahead, get up in your comfiest area with your snuggliest blanket, a good drink, which I tonight am drinking Blue Moon. And let me tell you about the 80s movie that I came across on Shudder. Okay, so we all know the 80s is known for some cult classics. Usually what happens with these cult classics is they really don't catch on until well after they've came out, right? So anyways, this one is called The Burning. It's a 1981 American slasher film directed by Tony Malum, starring Brian Matthews, Leah Aries, Brian Becker, Larry Joshua, and Lou David. And oddly enough, just so you guys know, this movie, like any other 80s movie I have ever watched, has these little, I like to call them the little funny gems, because the 80s seems to be where a few people got their start but didn't really, get big and get going yet. And in this one, there's a couple that I recognized, and I got a big old laugh out of it. So anyways, so for this one, per the usual, we're looking at a summer camp. And this summer camp happens to take place in New York. So, opening scene, we're watching a bunch of boys, teenagers, I guess, getting together to play a late night prank on a caretaker they don't really particularly like. His name is Cropsy. Yeah, Cropsy. So, at this camp, sleepover camp, this one is Camp Blackfoot. And so what happens is they're going to pull a prank on him. So what they do is one of the guys runs into the, I guess, like the wooden hut or whatever corpse he's staying at, and sets a worm-riddled skull with candles in the eye socket next to his bed, right? And Cropsy hears he's an alcoholic, and apparently he's kind of abusive. He also looks a little bit disfigured already. So anyways, when the caretaker wakes up by the campers who are banging on his window on the outside, because there was a group of them, so one of them ran inside to go put the skull in there, and the rest of them, were waiting for the perfect time. Anyways, so they're banging on his window, which, you're in the forest. Shit starts banging on your windows, and you don't expect anything to be. Naturally, you're going to be frightened. So anyway, so he wakes up, he's frightened. He's even more frightened because of the skull. He accidentally knocks into it, and it knocks onto his bed, which starts a fire. Oddly enough, he also has a gas tank in his cabin, hut, whatever, which then ignites a big flame. So then Cropsy and his cabin are engulfed in flames. He runs out. He stumbles down into the river as the boys who were playing the prank flee away. And so, terribly, terribly burned. Despite his horrific injuries, though, he does survive. So 5 years later, Cropsy is released from the hospital despite dealing with failed skin grafts, and has to wear a coat and hat to hide his further disfigurement. When he first leaves, he's wandering the streets of New York. Happens to kind of be in like a red light type of district. Um, a prostitute lures him to her apartment, and she kind of like teasing him or whatever. Oh, you're not gonna take your coat off. You're not gonna do this. Well, the light kind of hits his face a little bit. She screams, and then in a fit of rage, he kills her with shears, like not gardening shears, more like the ones the seamstresses uses and everything. So, anyways, so from there, he arms himself with now a pair of garden shears and sets out for another summer camp called Stonewater. Um, when you come across Stonewater, there's uh, lots of, we'll call them teenagers. A lot of the teenage campers are playing softball, and there is at one point during the softball game, one of the girls who I think she's playing like second or third base or something, goes into the woods to go search for the softball and narrowly avoids Cropsy. Cropsy? So the next morning, a camper named Alfred, which he's seen as the camp weirdo, probably more so on a spectrum or something. I don't know, kind of hard to tell. But anyways, so this girl Sally goes to the girls' showers, which oddly enough are indoor-outdoor showers. Like it has no, it has no roof, but it has running water. Has shower curtains, has walls. So, anyways, so she's taking a shower or whatever, and she starts to hear someone coming in and creaking and blah 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 blah. We'll come to find out Alfred had snuck in to try and scare her. So her screams bring the attention of the counselors. Michelle and Todd and the campers Karen and Eddie catch him. Michelle is furious at Alfred and demands that he leaves, but Todd, the counselor who's over the boys, obviously, kind of takes some pity on him and goes to talk to him. He learns that Alfred has no friends and was merely pulling a prank on Sally because basically everyone else has been really mean to this kid. Sally's boyfriend, I kept thinking his name was like Crazer, but it's not. Now that I'm actually looking at it in words, it's Glazer. Sally's boyfriend confronts Glazer. Sally's boyfriend Glazer, confronts Alfred, but Todd tells him to back off because Glazer's like the big macho kid. Yeah. Todd tells him to back off and, apologizes to Sally. So one night, while Alfred is bunked up with his bunkmates, which also happen to be Glazer, by the way, he's looking out a window and he notices Cropsy's face, disfigured, burnt face in the window, and he yells. And he tries to tell his bunkmates, but none of them believe him, obviously. The following day, the campers are brought by Todd and Michelle. So not all of the campers, the teenage campers, are brought by Todd and Michelle on a canoe trip down to the river Devil's Creek. After Todd tells them about the legend of Cropsy, Karen and Eddie go to the lake to skinny dip. Naturally, this being the 80s. And the male gaze is strong in this movie. He basically forces himself onto her. She gets mad. And as she's leaving, as Karen leaves because, she doesn't want to have sex with Eddie, she leaves the lake to find her clothes scattered in the woods. As she's collecting them, Cropsy slashes her throat with his shears. The next morning, Michelle finds Karen and the missing canoes. Eddie, Fish, these names, man. Eddie, Fish, Woodstock, Diane, and Barbara search for the canoe on a makeshift raft. When I mean makeshift raft, I mean a makeshift raft. They spot the canoe and start to paddle to it, but Cropsy ambushes them by jumping out of the canoe and savagely, and I mean savagely, murders them all. Glazer finally has sex with Sally in the woods, but suffers basically going a little too early. When he leaves to get matches for the campfire, Cropsy shoves his shears into Sally's chest. Her boyfriend returns only for Cropsy to stab him through the throat and pin him to the tree. And oddly enough, in the process of this, because when Glazer goes back to the camp to go find the matches, Alfred's the one, right? Alfred's the one sleeping closest to the fire and hears some rustling or whatever, or wakes up and notices that Glazer is taking the matches and walking back off into the woods. And yeah, so he follows him. And in the process of following him, he sees him obviously get murdered by our lovely Cropsy. So, anyways, um, Alfred witnesses his death and wakes up Todd. But Todd doesn't actually, he doesn't necessarily believe Alfred at first. And then finally he's like, oh my God, I'll follow you because, you're going to wake everybody else up. So he follows them and stumbles across dead bodies and then gets knocked out by Cropsy. Which, in turn, Cropsy then chases after Alfred. Meanwhile, Michelle finds the mutilated bodies on the makeshift raft because the raft comes floating back down. Everyone's like, oh, look, ha ha. So apparently when you go to summer camp in New York with a bunch of teenagers who are horny and bored, they also like to play pranks. And everyone seems to think that the raft is just all of the other campers who went off playing a prank. But it's not. So the counselor, Michelle, she finds mutilated bodies on the makeshift raft, brings the remaining campers back to the camp to contact authorities. In the process of that, Todd, regaining his consciousness, telling Michelle to take the campers back, then somehow finds an axe. I don't remember where. I thought I was paying attention. Apparently I wasn't. And goes to look for Cropsy and save Alfred because Alfred still has not returned. Which you see Alfred running through. I'm so sorry. Whew. Alfred running through the forest, which then comes upon like some ruins, like stone building type of rooms. Don't know really where they came from. Don't know if that's the old camp or anything like that. But anyways, is a story for a different day, I guess. So Cropsy grabs Alfred inside an abandoned mine shaft. Oh, it's a mine shaft. And pins him to the wall with his shears, which looked like that was very painful. And I will get into what I thought about this movie after I get over after I tell you guys the whole story. So anyways, so Todd goes and he's, same ruins. He hears Alfred yell out for help. So he starts trying to, follow the sound. So as Todd's looking for Alfred, he comes across the abandoned mine shaft. He discovers Karen's body, sees Cropsy armed with a flamethrower, where all of a sudden Todd vaguely remembers his involvement of the prank that made Cropsy who he is at this present time in the movie. So anyways, he's attacked by Cropsy, who reveals his disfigurements, and Alfred frees himself and stabs Cropsy with the shears. Before they can leave, Cropsy reappears and Todd ultimately slams the axe into his face, killing him. Alfred then ignites Cropsy's body with his own flamethrower. And as they make their way outside to Michelle, who brought the police, Cropsy's body burns away. And the way the movie ends is it ends with another counselor telling the creepy, creepy urban legend of Cropsy. So a couple things. The release date for this movie was May 8th, 1981. It's about an hour and a half or so. This takes off and ends up with the same cult following as like Friday the 13th, similar mainly because of the fact of like it being outside. We got horny teenagers. It's at a camp. Stuff like that. Gotta go skinny dipping. Gotta try and get some. Gonna go make a fire. Gonna go play jokes. kind of thing. I don't think it was terrible. I would say the climactic scene of the movie, like the climax, the fight, right? It's too dark. You can't really see it. Which kind of, I don't know, I guess maybe for me after watching stuff like, Insidious and all the others, which isn't really a slasher flick. So let's go to like Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer. Same thing, slasher flick, but you can see like all of these, big things happening. And the issue, at least for me, towards the end was it kind of goes dark. Like dark is in like you can't see what's going on. But you know, it's fun to watch. And so so while we're on the topic of what I thought of the movie, one of my favorite things about this movie, and I will say it's my absolute favorite, is the little gems I was talking about earlier, where you get, they're not necessarily stars, they're like the bit players, but you know who they are by looking at them. So we've got Jason Alexander in his younger days, probably looks like he's at least in his early 20s. Fisher Stevens, which, if you've ever seen the show Friends, is one of, is he Phoebe's? Yes, one of Phoebe's ex boyfriends. He's the shrink. And then you have Holly Hunter, who's been in like almost everything now. But yeah, no, I mean, decent movie. I think it's worth the watch. I think it's one of those fun ones that if you do like, like the 31 Days of Halloween, it's not a bad one to watch. It made me laugh because when you're watching like the gory, I guess like the slashery gory scenes, the blood looks like water, red water, like it's just running down too fast. And some of the cuts and stuff were it was good. It was good for its time. What I also liked about this is that it is kind of, and I'll say kind of, it's loosely, and I mean loosely based off of a legend that is known in Staten Island, apparently. He's kind of their boogeyman. His name is Corpsey, and well, let's just go over it. So, as the story goes, Corpsey was rumored to be a homicidal madman who escaped an escaped mental patient with a hook for a hand who hunted children and dragged them back to the tunnel system that lay under the abandoned ruins of the old Seaview Hospital, a former tuberculosis sanatorium. Which I think is kind of interesting because to me, that kind of legend screams more of I Know What You Did Last Summer and Freddy Krueger. So another interesting thing that you will find is that there was a the Cropsey killer Andre Rand, which whenever you do look up the Cropsey legend, it's really hard to find something that doesn't end up talking about him. So this is kind of like this legend is one of those time-honored traditions of summer camps in New York, apparently, and some of the surrounding regions. Swapping the ghost stories or whatever about around the campfire. I don't know. I was in Girl Scouts. We didn't really have that. So let me tell you, I found it and I'm excited. I am going to tell you the lore that is still shared, from my understanding, currently. So George Cropsey was a judge. He had a wife and 2 children, all of whom he loved very much. He owned a small summer cottage along the shores of Maston Lake. His wife and children would go there for the summer months, and he would come up to visit them on the weekends. One night, 2 campers snuck away from the camp's secluded evening activity and went down to the lake to roast some marshmallows. The fire they built went out of control, and there was a big fire on the lake. George Cropsey's family was burnt to death. When Cropsey read the report in the newspaper, it is said he became completely white and disappeared from his home 2 weeks later. One of the campers from Lakota was found near the lake, chopped to death with an axe. There was talk of closing the camp for the remainder of the summer, but they didn't. Just like every horror camp / film reminds me of 1984, American Horror Story. The camp owners insisted upon constant supervision of the campers. There were state troopers posted in the area. Each counselor, this sucks, each counselor either slept with a knife, an axe, or a rifle. One night, about 3 in the morning, one of the counselors was awakened by the screams of one of the campers. He put a flashlight in the direction of the screams and saw his camper bleeding to death, and standing over him, a man with chalk white hair, red bloodshot eyes, and swinging a long bloody axe. When the maniac saw the light, he ran from the bunk, but the counselor chopped at his leg with the hatchet he was armed with. The man got away but left a trail of blood into the woods. The state troopers were called and followed the trail into the woods. They called to Cropsey to surrender, but all they heard was the crazed laughter. They determined his position, and when he would not give himself up, they built a circle of fire around him. When the fire had subsided, they searched the woods for his remains but could find nothing. The police closed the file on George Cropsey, assuming he was dead. It is said that on the evening of the anniversary of the death of Judge Cropsey's family, you can see the shadow of a man limping along the shores of Maston Lake. So, yeah, I was really excited. Kind of to have that lore to go along with this considered a cult classic of a movie. I don't know. You guys tell me. This is the first time I ever heard of it. But yeah, I mean, for me, I always like to see the different generations in their horror movies, right? The 80s is known for like being gory, over the top gory. Not like over the top, not like Saw over the top, but for like the 80s, it's over the top. I don't know. I enjoyed it. There were some parts of it where complete and utter eye rolls. The male gaze happening throughout the movie. The usual let's show how horny teenagers are when they're sent to camp kind of thing. No different than today, but whatever. And yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a slasher flick to put on your thing that's not like gory like Hostel and Saw and stuff, I think this one's really good for that. I do. I find it was a good watch. It wasn't fantastic, but it was good. And I have to remind myself that it's good for the time period it came out in. Definitely I would probably put it on, like the 31 Days of Halloween or whoever. Sometimes some people like to go a little crazy and start in September. Feel free. You can find it on Shudder. I don't know where else you can find it. It's mainly because I go on Shudder and I'm like, what should I watch tonight? And that happened to be the movie. So, yeah. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you've ever watched it. And for anyone who's listening who may be from the Northeast region up there in New York and stuff, tell me if you have heard of this lore of Cropsey, the Cropsey axe murderer, Cropsey killer, however they want to call him. And yeah, I hope you guys have a good night. Well, that concludes this episode of the Paranormal Misfits. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest, make sure you subscribe to this podcast on whichever platform you're listening to on. And give me a follow on Instagram at Paranormal Misfit. If you have your own spooky paranormal story you'd like to share or want to hear about a particular lore, place, or whatnot, please feel free to drop me a DM in Instagram. And on that note, I will catch you all later at the next episode, my ghouls.